Senator Colbeck, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. I know you had a long flight to get in, so thank you for getting here.
No, thank you very much, Senator McBroom, and thank you, fellow members of the committee and all other interested parties here. This is obviously some interesting times in which we live. I appreciate the opportunity to address this body. I know there's a lot of discussion around what happened in the 2020 election. Hope to provide a lot of information around that today. And keep in mind, what I'm going to be talking about today is just the tip of the iceberg due to time constraints. But a lot of people are here to provide testimony. And even right now, I see signs that say, show us the evidence. Please understand there is plenty of evidence. The toughest part on this whole thing is sorting it out and triaging it and identify what is most pertinent to the discussions of the day. And today I'm going to focus in on one particular body of evidence. The rest of the folks can chime in on the rest of them. And as you pointed out, I was present at the Detroit AV Counting Board. I was there as a poll challenger, certified through the Election Integrity Fund, which is an organization I helped start quite a while ago in anticipation for concerns around this upcoming election. And in addition to that, which is pertinent to my testimony today, I'm also a certified Microsoft Small Business Specialist. I work in cabling design for the International Space Station. I worked on with the Department of Defense as a contractor on advanced simulation systems for the military, wargaming systems, so pretty comfortable in the software area. There's been a huge narrative around this whole election that says, number one, it started off saying that there is no voter fraud. Then the narrative changed in the media to there is no widespread voter fraud. Then it changed into there is no widespread voter fraud that could impact the results of the election. Well, what I hope to provide you today is just a snippet of information that indicates no, it was rampant. It doesn't have to be rampant to be significant. If we have voter fraud in just one out of our 83 counties, if that county is Wayne County, you got an issue because over 800,000 votes were cast in that county, and that's much more than the margin of difference we're talking about in the election for the president. So, key questions. Now, obviously, I've been in the position where you guys are at right now, so my first thing is I'm trying to figure out what question I should be asking when I'm hearing all this testimony. So, if I were in your shoes, I'd be asking, first and foremost, what's the chain of custody for the election artifacts that we're talking about? Has it been broken? Number two, is there evidence of election fraud? Number three, was there evidence that election statutes were violated? And you can have election fraud and not violate a statute if we don't have that hole covered in statute right now. Was there evidence of any third party or external manipulation of our election data? And how do you respond? And this is very important, and we'll talk about this at the end. How do you respond if the answer to any of these questions is yes? All right, so key concept, chain of custody. And I simplify this to just 4 key links in that chain of custody. Qualified voter files, number 1. Number 2 is the poll books. Number 3 is the ballots themselves. And number 4, which is where I'm going to focus my testimony today, is on the vote tally itself. How do you communicate the tabulated results upstream to all points, up to the county, up to the media, et cetera? How does that information get packaged and shipped out? And we're going to talk about what we've saw as far as concerns here. A lot of people are testifying here today are going to talk about a lot of things that happen specific to the poll books and specific to the ballots. The QVF is not something that happened on the ground here, but that's something that should be of concern as well. But let's focus in on the vote tabulation. So there's all kinds of anomalies that were identified that after the fact in the election when we actually looked at the vote tally results. And I'm not going to go into any of the details on any of this stuff in the interest of time, but as a person who was on the ground at the Detroit AV Counting Board, it's tough for me to go off and see a big picture item. If I can't actually trace the vote tallies coming out of the tabulator, I can't see where there are specific anomalies that are happening. This is something that happens after the fact. I will attest to some things that corroborate nefarious purposes towards the end of what we did when you look at this data in context of what we did observe. First thing I want to point out is one of the things that when you're looking at data that was transmitted during the election, there was something very interesting that happened. And they were transmitting, we have evidence that from the Dominion voting system, there is a transmittal of fractional vote data. Now, you guys have done a lot of votes inside the Senate, as I did when I was serving my 2 terms. I don't recall any of those vote tallies up on the board having a decimal point. Do you guys? So that indicates right off the top that something's rotten in Denmark. So I'm going to start off just one quick example. I'm not going to belabor this. I call it the little switch, where we all acknowledge that there are some issues with votes. If it wasn't for an alert, regular old citizen by the name of Bill Bailey identifying that this doesn't make sense, that Antrim County went for Joe Biden and and led to a recount, we never would have understood or found that vote flip of 6,000 votes. And what are some possible technical explanations for that? Well, we know what the official explanations were. They said that it was initially a software glitch, and then it was changed to a clerical error. But the technical explanations for what might have happened is that when you scan a ballot, it's going to be coded in accordance with it's going to have a QR code that tells you what the ballot type is on it or what the ballot style is. And if you flip that ballot style so that maybe you juxtapose the position of maybe a presidential candidate from one to the other, all of a sudden what would normally have been registered as a vote maybe for Trump turns into a vote for Biden. Another way that that could happen, and how you can, this is the only way that I know of that can explain a fractional vote, is if you implemented a ranked choice voting algorithm. That's the only technical part of the Dominion suite that I am aware of that could lead to a fractional value. You could have data manipulation via remote access, and then you can also address the need for, there's an opportunity that if you do not do a robust public accuracy test where you've investigated all the different permutations of votes that could occur, people that know that there's loopholes in those public accuracy tests can take advantage of them in the algorithm and flip votes in context of that. In particular, be concerned about the idea that they could flip, if you don't test for this explicitly in your public accuracy test, they can flip from one candidate to a write-in candidate, and we have an affidavit attesting to that in the, among our many examples of evidence. So, where's this election data saved? Well, on these compact flashcards. There's a primary and secondary flashcard for each one of the tabulators, and that's where that data is collected. There's also a security key that enables you to update the information on these compact flashcards. Then we're going to go into the big switch. And so we talk about the margin here in Michigan to be about 154,188 if we're just focused in on the presidential race. And in that context, what we've identified through sworn affidavit is that there were votes that were being dumped in counties of Kent, Macomb, Oakland, and Wayne counties that just defy logic because they were dumped at a time within about a 2.5-hour time period that there's no possible way that you could have tabulated that many votes with the scanners that were on site for those particular locations in that time frame. So per that analysis, we understand that at least 289,000 votes are questionable in that context. And there's much more than that when you add up all the discrepancies. So specifically, let's zero in on the Detroit AV Counting Board. And I'm not going to go into any of the details associated with this, except I want to highlight one thing that came out of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers, and that is specifically in the results of this AV Counting Board. The official results that were posted by Wayne County state that there were 0 registered voters associated with 172,000 votes in that official statement of votes report that came out of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers, yet it was still certified. Well, there's doubt about that, but they went up and eventually certified at the state level despite knowing that. So that's already an indication that paperwork's not in order. So what did I specifically focus in on? Like I said, I'm zeroing in on vote tallies. There's going to be a lot of evidence on the other elements, but I wanted to focus in on the big picture when I got in there. And due to my background and kind of a network techie geek, you guys all know me well enough to know that I'm very geeky in that context, right? I like to focus in on what was going on with the network configuration because I wanted to understand how those vote tallies were being communicated. So my first question was up to Chris Thomas, who is serving as a consultant for the city of Detroit. And Chris, as you know, is the state elections director here in Michigan for decades, very knowledgeable gentleman on voting process. And I had what I thought was a pretty simple question. I go, Chris, I want to know how you maintain chain of custody between these tabulators and all points north up to the county, and where are these where are these results being reported? And he stated that he didn't know. All right. So I kept asking him. Finally, the end game was, I don't know, and I'm not going to tell you. That was the final answer I got. And I thought that was kind of disconcerting because my role there was as a poll challenger to make sure we protected the integrity of the election, and I was specifically, you know, I can see physically, I can see a ballot, I can see if an envelope signature doesn't match a poll book signature. That stuff I can see. If you're communicating via the internet, via the Ethernet cables that were in there, via computer, it's very difficult to get in there and follow those electrons up the chain here to see what's going on here. So I wanted to know exactly how that's done. In most precincts in my former Senate district, what would happen is the way you communicate the results is that you wait until the end of the night, you do a final tabulation of the books, and you put all the final results. So you get a dump onto a flash drive, you put that flash drive into a sealed envelope, and you send that up the chain either to the city or to the county, actually to both. There's probably about 5 copies of the flash drive made. And you send it, it's in a secure package, and you can maintain that chain of custody. What I saw in Detroit was something more concerning. Every one of those tabulator machines was connected via Ethernet cable. That Ethernet cable connected to a router. That router connected to all the other computers in that network, including up to what's called the local data center, which was managing all the returns for 503 precincts here in the city of Detroit. What was further concerning was that I saw a Ethernet cable coming from the wall connected into one of these routers that was connected to the local data center, which was connected to all the tabulators and adjudicators, and that seemed to indicate an outside internet connection. When I flip on my phone and I look for connected networks, I also understand that there's a wireless network called AV_connect that was accessible. I wonder what AV stands for. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that's probably something to do with absentee vote. So, bottom line, I was a little concerned with the physical configuration. So the stuff I could observe, here's the network topology that I put together the night that I got back after serving on the at the AV counting board, and what it showed to me explicitly was a connection to the internet. Furthermore, I asked all the election officials that were there, Daniel Baxter, I asked former state representative David Nathan, I said, are these connected to the internet? And they all denied internet connectivity. Yet when I went around to all the monitors on it, and you guys probably have Windows laptops with you right now, you go down to the bottom right-hand corner and look at that little, there's a little icon there talking about your network connectivity. When you roll your mouse over there, it'll pop up in Word saying connected to internet. All right, so why is that a big deal? Let's go through. First, I want to demonstrate these guys were indeed connected to a local area network, and that local area network includes a connection to the local data center. Chris Thomas has already, through other statements, validated that local data center was connected to the internet. And for anybody who's not familiar with IT, if one computer on a network is connected to the internet, all the computers are connected to the internet. Now, the folks at Dominion will say that there's an air gap because they have a firewall in between there, and they use encryption for all the communications. I'm telling you, there's folks from that attend these DEF CON conferences every single year that can hack into a system like that in a matter of seconds. So, no, there's no such thing as an air gap. And you think something like elections determine who the leader of the free world is going to be for the next 4 years might tempt somebody to go off and play games with that? And we've got evidence that that indeed happened. So further evidence of, even the contract with the state of Michigan defines that these are designed, this equipment's designed to connect to the Ethernet and also in some cases specifically to via cell-based modems to the internet. The Dominion Tech Support Manual says these are designed to connect via Ethernet cables. So, so why does it matter? Here's why it matters. How many of you guys had a chance to read Sidney Powell's lawsuit in the state of Michigan? It's about 75 pages. Good. Hopefully you went through that in detail. Because in there, it highlights some things that should be a concern to every single senator, every single representative, no matter what party you're a member of. And I'm telling you, all the data that I've collected here, I want to make sure it's clear that everybody understands. I've been working with Bernie Sanders supporters. I've been working with registered Democrats. I've been working with libertarians, independents, and Republicans of all stripes. The stuff that we're talking about here should not be just a concern for Republicans. This should be a concern for everybody who calls themselves an American. So in this context, I want to highlight the detailed evidence on this. Go read the affidavits that are put into that Sidney Powell lawsuit. I'm not going to go through in detail here. Bottom line is, If it's connected to the internet, you open the door to nefarious actors outside of this country, and that should be a concern to everybody. Furthermore, we discovered that the National Institute of Standards and Technology left a proverbial key under the mat, essentially provided a map for anybody. By the way, first, before I get into that, we found admin passwords for the Dominion voting system, and the testimony attests to that, available up on the dark web. People could get access to it. That's important because with this key under the mat left by a gentleman out at the NIST, it provided all the specs or the specific files to look for in these election systems and what their sizes were so that you could mask any abnormal traffic that would happen when you're hacking a system. So is there any corroboration to what could happen with somebody accessing this via the internet and what we observed out at the polls? Yes. We've got affidavits talking about computer or network anomalies that happened at these, including one error message that says, warning, this computer is being hacked. So, guys, this is really happened. It happened at the poll books for that. There's adjudicator, or I think it was the adjudicator stations that had the computers down for about a half an hour inside of Detroit due to a network-related issue. Furthermore, there's another data piece here that's not on here, but I talked early on about we've got an affidavit that attests specifically to poll worker in Detroit that observed the precinct printout at the end of the day and noticed that there was a bunch of write-in votes for that particular precinct. And the thing that was odd about that is that they did not see one ballot with a write-in vote on it the whole time they were doing that. And they got an affidavit to that effect. So what does this all add up to? I'm just going to say this is a referendum. There's only two choices for each of you in this context. Number one, you believe in principle of constitutional governance, and you realize that chain of custody is broken, there's significant evidence of election fraud, et cetera, or, and I'm not saying this term lightly here, or there's an attempted coup. And those aren't my words. That's the word of a registered Democrat, Brian McCaffrey, when he made his observation as to what was going on in the Philadelphia counting board. Like I said, this should concern people of every party inside America. Any American citizen should be concerned about what they're seeing here. So what can you do as legislators? Well, I'm just going to give you what I would recommend, and you guys can take the steps that you believe is appropriate. There's a lot of people are trying to convince you right now that there's nothing you can do. It's been certified, move on. There's nothing else that you can go off and do. I'm telling you that's not the truth. In the United States Constitution, Article 2 gives the legislature specific authority on how to allocate electoral college votes. That doesn't mean that the governor has any say in it. It means it's, and because of Article 6, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, Supremacy Clause, that supersedes anything we may have in statute here in the state of Michigan. Furthermore, Article 4, Section 4 guarantees a Republican form of government. A Republican form of government means that people elect their representatives, which implies that we've got integrity around the election process itself. I believe this is just a small sample, that one chain of this overall chain of custody around this election was broken, and I just submit it to you for consideration. There are options before you, and I'd just like to yield the rest of my time here, if I could, for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Senator Colbeck. Questions from Vice Chair Lucido.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Colbeck. I appreciate you coming and offering your testimony. I had listened to you about the chain of custody. We use that in criminal law. When you break the chain of custody, you find that there's a flaw, and as such, it makes for a difficult conviction. In fact, you throw the case out.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your analysis, but I like to get to what's called substantive issues. You indicate that the vote tally affected the election. What offer of proof do you have? That's what they use in a courtroom. And I know this isn't a courtroom.
Yep.
This is a legislative process that you were a part of.
Yeah.
So, and I did talk to you on the phone, did I not, this weekend?
Yep.
And I want to make sure when you came with your testimony that you'd have offers of proof, because as legislators, we like to take that information, digest it, and bring it back to our districts indicating what we've heard by the testimony, because this isn't out there, and I wish it was. I wish it was on TV right now, so that the people can hear exactly what these offers of proofs are. So you were down there, you were a poll challenger, you were looking at 800,000 votes that passed into Wayne County. Your vote tabulator, you said, or the vote tally, affected this election.
Well, I'll tell you, there's two pieces of evidence in that I've talked about here today. Number one, I don't think anybody denies that there was a vote flipping that occurred in Antrim County. They're just curious as to what the cause was. So there's
Not to stop you, but we had the clerk testify.
Yeah.
Were you a party to that testimony?
No, I was not.
So when the clerk testified, she gave her analysis as the clerk. Whether she's right, wrong, or indifferent, we could only take value of what the testimony was.
Right. Same with us.
And she at first indicated that it must be a computer program software glitch.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, she found that she must have opened up, and I think it was Senator Tice, but I'm not going to speak for her just yet today. But it was somebody that opened up and changed the ballot that was already locked into place and had two nonpartisan candidates or counties or two nonpartisan communities that they locked in, and that's what was said to us, whether it's right or wrong. And I do appreciate your depth and scope about being an engineer and having this amazing ability to go ahead and try to identify and articulate these issues. The next thing is the electronic chain of custody. Mm-hmm. I'm real interested in this. Yeah. If I have a computer with a ether cable, router, and therefore I would have the ability to be hacked, I think you called it. Mm-hmm. Tell us how we don't have an expert in computer software with computer hardware about the cable, rotor, and the hacking portion that we can all digest as citizens.
Yeah, well, number one, you need to have access after the fact. I mean, if they're not allowing me to inspect, and I was deliberately prohibited from getting close to a lot of these connections by one of the gentlemen that was up there and the configuration of the site, but I saw enough to indicate I could follow the connections between them. So, I mean, there's, I don't know how much detail to go into on any of this stuff, but the bottom line is, if you're connecting, I can verify this physical connection between all those, the tabulators, the adjudicators, and the local data center with one another. We've already got Chris Thomas testifying that the local data center was connected to the internet. So the only question is, were there protections and layers in between that would give the appearance of an air gap? And I'm just telling you, I'm not the hacker that does this. I'm not a black hat that can go in and do this, but there are people that can do that.
I got it. So then it comes down to this.
Yeah.
How does one maintain the chain of custody in electronics?
Well, I think the only way to do that is what I was talking about, what usually happens in other precincts where the clerks are getting that information from an encrypted flash drive from a tabulator that's not connected to the internet, and then transferring that in a sealed envelope up to the county so that they can add it to the tabulator result to the other areas. That did not happen in Detroit. I never saw one flash drive transferred from a computer to another computer. There was a wall up on the wall all around the center. There's a red area that was supposed to be where they put out the final precinct tallies, just like you would see in most other precincts, if you will. That never happened. They had all the zero printouts from all the tabulators, which is good, so they had them printed up for the beginning of the counting day, but they never had the final tally printed up there at all. So I would be very curious, and this is an area that I think, frankly, the burden of proof is on the Secretary of State and the Board of Canvassers, which is, how do you verify that you maintain the chain of custody? Because I'd be very interested in their answer on that.
The data transmission, and Mr. Chairman, going to Senator Colbeck's point, we are all elected. We all put a vote up on the board, and I've never seen a fraction, so thank you for sharing that, because we don't have fraction votes. We have one vote for our district.
Yeah, I was joking that sometimes you don't feel like your vote means as much as some other people's votes, but it's kind of,
The data transmission, though, of the fractional vote, has anybody ever questioned the software company and asked them, is that a possibility?
To the best of my knowledge, no, but it's undeniable that that's something that they use it for.
I guess if I was to ask, I think they're using the software in 29 states. Is that correct?
It depends on where you look. I've seen anywhere from 28 to 30. Yeah.
Okay. So we're right in the ballpark, just maybe a wrong base. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
has anybody asked the software company, including maybe the Attorney General of this state, could you explain how this fraction tallied? How it was possible that a fraction could even be thought about?
To the best of my knowledge, no, but I do know that the state of Texas refused to procure Dominion voting systems because of security vulnerabilities.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and it's great to see you, Pat.
All right,
Thank you,
thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lucido. Senator Tice.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Senator Colbeck, for all your work. I know you've been almost nonstop on this, so thank you. First off, can we get your presentation?
He's got it.
Great. And then secondarily, we were speaking about Antrim County, and this is something that I've focused on quite a bit. So the issues that happened for her happened once she finalized the election and then realized there were candidates that needed to get added onto it. So she locked it, and then she unlocked it, changed it, and relocked it again. All over the state, there were courts that ordered things on ballots after that deadline. And so I'm wondering, has anybody that you're aware of done the analysis in those communities to figure out whether or not those are accurate representations of what we would expect out of those communities?
I don't believe it's been done, and this is why it's so concerning. If it was literally, if it wasn't for Bill Bailey saying something's wrong here, there never would have been a recount. We never would have identified this software glitch / clerical error / whatever you want to call it. So no, I anticipate that this is across the spectrum. And when you look at what actually changed in there, to testimony we were looking at earlier, this is affecting down ballot. I mean, I know we're all focused in on presidential race here, but man, I'm concerned all across the state for down ballot issues too.
To your point, it was way down ballot that she was making the changes.
Yeah.
It was at a township. No, it was at a village
School board,
level,
yeah.
and then millage level. So you were at the lowest partisan, and then below that is what where the changes were being amended, and it affected all the way up to the top of the ballot. So I find that disconcerting, and I'm wondering if anybody's done the analysis on the other counties where changes were made last minute.
And this gets into a whole topic of reform down the road, but I'll tell you one of the biggest challenges to this whole thing, why there's delay in some of this information coming out, is we've literally had an army of volunteers trying to get the precinct by precinct results just for the presidential election. Then we're working our way down to U.S. Senate, to congressional races. It's tedious as heck, and a lot of people here are part of that data warrior crew that's pulling this data together. But there's no reason we shouldn't have precinct by precinct roll-ups at the state level available for data mining analysis like you're suggesting.
And then, so there are a couple of things. One of the other commentaries that you said talked about having no registered voters. I know that many communities create a separate, just kind of a separate area where they're doing all of the absentee tabulation. So you won't show any in-person voting at that tabulation, but everybody is going to be absentee. And sometimes, I think, those registered voters would be reported within their precincts rather than in the absentee counting board. So I think it's possible that might be, but I don't know. So again, we need to dig into it further, and I thank you for coming forward very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Senator Colbeck.
Yes, sir.
When it came to the Antrim County issue, did you observe the testimony of the clerk before the committees?
No, I haven't seen her specific testimony. Okay. I've been looking at some of the affidavits that were based on that testimony.
So, I asked this question at that time regarding how such an anomaly may have been observed in a precinct, a county, where the weirdness of the result would not be as readily observable as it was obvious in Antrim County. And while we had some trouble speaking the same language to each other, I mean, the answer is that the tabulators that receive the votes and print up the tabulation sheet, those didn't demonstrate the inaccuracy that the software analysis did for the unofficial vote count that was announced. And so when the Board of Canvassers would come together to certify the vote at a later time, they would have easily noticed that the tabulation sheets were not in accord with the unofficial vote count that was announced by the clerk.
Yeah.
And so are you disputing that that's a correct answer, or is that answer satisfactory to you as to how we can, I'm not saying that recounts or audits shouldn't occur, but I'm just saying that answer would seem to me to suffice to show that some anomaly between what the software announces the vote is versus what the tabulators, any discrepancy there would be noticed by the boards of canvassers.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
And so when I was in my engineering days, we do something called a failure modes and effects analysis. So I try to identify all the possible things that could go wrong. And in this, we think it's actually a design feature of Dominion to keep that tally in sync with the printout. So there's another step that happens in between. And that's kind of an all-important step. First, you scan it, then you allocate the vote, then it's printed. So in the translation between the scan and the vote tally itself, which is what gets printed on the card, which is supposed to correlate to the printout, as long as you make your transition or switch before that,
I understand
then,
that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I understand that vulnerability theoretically.
Yeah.
But in the case of Antrim County, the tabulator sheets were accurate upon rerunning the numbers. It was simply the software. So the idea that the software was changing both the tabulator and the computer announced votes didn't occur there. The tabulators turned out to be right on the money. It was just the other issue.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that what you're presenting isn't theoretically possible, but at least in Antrim County, that theory is not evidenced by what occurred.
Yeah, and I'm just, when I did in my testimony, I wanted to highlight all the different possibilities from a technical perspective on how that could be done. There are forensic experts that can testify to that specifically. And this gets to a fundamental issue that we've had since day one on it, is getting access to this information to go off and do that detailed forensic analysis. And I don't think it's limited to Antrim County.
How do we move, though, from what's possible to what's actually happened?
By getting access to that actual data.
And so
those compact flashcards in particular are very important to get access to.
And the chain of custody issues, I recognize that. So one other question, and then I have other members who are waiting. These possibilities, these possible vulnerabilities that you detailed seem to me to be undercut in Michigan, and I don't know other states, but at least undercut in Michigan by the fact that we maintain the paper ballots. And so the opportunity to recount and the fact that every election cycle there are random audits done that have continued to validate that the software has been accurate would seem to undercut this possibility it's happening or being something somebody would attempt to do in Michigan.
This gets into a very complex discussion because now it's conceivable you can go back in and prepare whatever ballot tally you want in physical ballot form to match the numbers that you want to have in the physical in the final vote tally. It's possible to go off and map that together, which is one of the reasons why it's so concerning as to how sloppy it was in Wayne County in regards to the idea of poll books balancing with the number of ballots that were out there. So I just want to highlight that I've focused in on vote tallies as part of the key issue on it, but where you're going starts taking us upstream as well into the ballots themselves, because you're looking and saying, hey, these are what the ballots said, there's no discrepancy associated with it. It gets into a discussion of where did those ballots come from? What was the chain of custody around those ballots? What's the chain of custody between the ballots and the person who was supposed to have voted for that ballot? Did you maintain that in the poll book with the verification? So all I'm suggesting on this is that I'm just zeroing in on how the heck did you transfer the results from tabulator A upstream to county and other areas? Is there evidence to suggest that there's a concern, not just in Antrim County, but keep in mind the other testimony that was for 289,000 votes that were pushed out as the official vote tally or whatever from those 4 counties that exceeded the complete scanning capacity of those 4 counties during that time frame. That's an explanation that I'd really like to see. So The stuff you're talking about, it's going to get into a detailed discussion of everything upstream of that chain of custody.
But Senator, help me understand, if a person or persons had the ability to stuff the box,
Yeah.
you know, for, you know, just to borrow colloquialism,
Electronically, yeah.
to stuff the box with the paper ballots, as you're mentioning,
Yep.
then what would the need be to have the software provide an inaccurate count? I mean, if you have the ability
For
to
recounts, yeah.
I guess it seems like one or the other is all that's,
No,
I'm not sure
I mean,
why.
ultimately, when it's all said and done, I mean, you're going to go off and try to make sure that you have all this stuff in sync. Right.
I'm sorry, to members, I have one other question. And this is a follow-up to Senator Lucido's question earlier regarding fractional voting.
Yeah.
Do you have actual paper or screenshots or something that show a fractional vote and where it came from, what that's referencing specifically?
This is in the affidavit provided by Russ Ramslander, and what they were doing, and it's probably too complicated to go into here, although I do have a slide that kind of demonstrates a little bit of the path I can get into. But this is an actual printout from Dominion Voting Systems, and in their translate or their feed to all of the news outlets, and there's a whole chain of command that they go through for this data. And I was never interested in that. I was interested in seeing the flash up on the screen that says percentage of precincts reporting, what's the vote. But behind that simple number chase, there's a whole bunch of handoffs. And okay. I think I've got this actually in a backup slide, so let me just double check here. Once you get an appreciation for all the different handoffs that this goes through, it starts making a little bit more sense. So let me.
Well, in the interest of everyone's time here, I mean, you said you've got it in the presentation, you've sent it to me, so I mean, I'll look for it. And you and I can talk offline, too.
Yep.
So is it okay if we move to the next question?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellent analysis, Patrick. Quick question. The integrity of our elections, you're right about that. It's not a Republican or Democratic thing. It's just too important. Where is the Justice Department? Why aren't they looking into it?
That's a good question. It really is. I know Attorney General Barr has got a letter that was submitted a couple months before the election saying we need to be bird-dogging any issues of election integrity, and I've been pretty outspoken about my concern with the election. I've reached out to what do they call it, to Matthew Schneider in particular directly regarding here's some concerns we have. I put out op-eds out in the Detroit News to that effect, and all that's gotten me so far is being discredited by Judge Kenney saying because I was looking for voter fraud and found it that I'm not a credible witness. So I'm a little concerned about the lack of movement there, and there does need to be more engagement. But the bottom line is we do have a suit on the table right here in Michigan that's going to a federal court. That's the Sidney Powell lawsuit. We also have lawsuits that have been introduced by the folks at the Great Lakes Justice Center, and I'm affidavit in one of those lawsuits that's currently being considered by the Michigan Supreme Court. So there is legal action being taken. Why the prosecutors are not getting engaged in any productive capacity to this date, I can't attest to.
Yeah, it's very concerning. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Vice Chair Irwin.
Thank you, Chair. If you were a statewide candidate in Michigan in this last election, with everything that you believe about election fraud, and you were on the losing end, much like, say, President Trump or candidate John James, would you have requested a recount?
I've got doubts with the integrity of the recount process, so I probably would not have done that. And by the way, just to put this in context, back in 2016, when President Trump did win Michigan explicitly, and Jill Stein ordered a recount, I was just as adamant about pursuing election integrity in the wake of that. I had one of my staffers that was out in Detroit, same place where I identified a lot of other problems right now, and she was there present when they came up and identified a poll book that said 306 votes were cast, but there's only 50 ballots inside of it. So I've been concerned about this from even when our top of the ticket guy is the victor.
So you would not seek a recount even though you believe there is fraud. You would seek remedy through the courts to just throw out votes and tally what was left? Is that your approach?
What I believe should be done, which was not done by the State Board of Canvassers and Wayne County Board of Canvassers, is a detailed forensic audit, because that's what a canvass is. It's an internal audit, essentially, is what it comes down to. And I wanted them to perform, and I still would like a performance of a detailed forensic audit. And as we identified, I mean, we talk about Antrim County. This isn't just a Wayne County issue. We don't know how many other counties this may have impacted that flew under the radar, didn't have a Bill Bailey highlighting what was going on. I believe you need a full forensic audit. The key question is they haven't demonstrated chain of custody on any of the key election data. So, yeah, I'm concerned. You can't just go off and fix it with a recount of the ballot. That's downstream. If you've already got this whole chain of custody broken at the qualified voter file level and at the poll book level, what good's a recount going to do?
Well, I think that it's pretty telling that the Trump campaign did not request a recount in Michigan. It seems pretty clear to me that they know that a recount would mess up their current strategy, which is just to throw up a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And it's particularly telling also that you here, sir, in committee, you have continued to repeat information about Antrim County, and then when you were corrected with the testimony that this committee heard, you just go back and repeat the same old misconstrued statements about what happened in Antrim County. So forgive me if it's difficult after reading these lawsuits and listening to your testimony to understand even what you're talking about. We need some evidence. We need some proof. All we've got here are conjecture and musings by former Senator Kolbeck.
All right. Well, I'll tell you, upstream, we talk about the recount issue in particular. You want to talk about some of the upstream concerns that have never been refuted. We got 8.1 million registered voters here in the state of Michigan. The only problem with that is demographic analysis shows that more than 300,000 and as high as 600,000 of those folks should not be on the voter rolls. So you want to go off and do a recount, you've already got a broken link right up at the top that says there's over 300,000 people that should not even be eligible to vote in the state of Michigan. You've got some serious problems when you even, the Antrim County and everything downstream of it, frankly, is interesting side notes once you realize that somebody's breached the top link of the chain of custody. So how can you be confident in anything downstream?
Senator Santana.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you allowing me to sit at your table today, committee members. And as the only Detroiter up here today, I have a couple questions for you, Senator Kolbeck.
Sure.
On Thursday, October 29th, the city clerk hosted a challengers conference where Chris Thomas and Daniel Baxter gave a detailed overview of the process.
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand, they provided a thorough explanation of all three steps of the orientation process by ballot recording information in the poll book, tabulating ballots through the ICC high-speed tabulators, and the adjudication process where the overvoted blank ballots and the write-in ballots were reviewed by teams composed of one Republican as well as one Democrat. Did anyone attend the conference?
To the best of my knowledge, we've been asking for when that would actually occur, and there's a gentleman here, he might be here, Phil O'Halloran. Phil, are you here? Phil can talk to that because we're specifically making repeated requests for information related to events like that, and I'll let Phil fill in the blanks associated with that, but I was very concerned. I can tell you, if I was notified about that meeting, I would have been there.
Well, it seems like, these things would have been addressed at that meeting, and that meeting was open to everyone. So it seems that, maybe your committee should have had some more communication with the city, but the city also provided that information as well. Yeah,
like I said, we'll let Phil testify, but believe me, there were attempts to do that, and I can tell you COVID was used as an excuse to push off meetings, to push off attendance at different things. There's a whole sequence of emails that I was working with folks to try to identify specifically when things like that would happen. We're concerned about the use of a Reliant scanning system to verify ballot signatures, for example. The Reliant system when you want to go off and the clerk's office will validate that the voter signature on the ballot envelope matches the one that we have in the qualified voter file. And if it doesn't, then they're not a qualified voter, right? So you can't go off and count their ballot. We wanted to know what was going on with that Reliant system. How was it being calibrated? Because if you calibrate that at a very permissive level, if you will, you're not going to filter out any bad signatures. And we also know that Reliant voting system is based on 8-point signature technology that was over 2 decades old. So it's not the latest and greatest you'll see with banking systems that are used today. So believe me, we're trying to get access to that type of information for quite a while before the election.
Mayor Chair, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually ran into a constituent at Marshall's as I was shopping, and her mother had an issue with the signature, and so her ballot, she got that information back to her home. So she had, because the signatures did not match up.
Yeah.
And the clerk's office did resubmit to her a new, that one obviously was spoiled, but they did submit to her a new ballot for her to be able to fill out. So the integrity that the clerk is providing, in my opinion, is very concise, and it is a integral system. So they did look at that signature to see that it was not matching up with her mother's signature. So I don't think that your argument is valid. Wow. And if you don't have factual information to prove that, then it seems like this is speculative in nature.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Santana. Senator Colbeck, I really appreciate all the time you put into the presentation and for your efforts at voter integrity and stuff. And so appreciate you being here today and submitting this to me, as well as some other information that I'll be making available to the group on process flow for Election Day. Any other members have a question? No? Yes?
Sorry, it's not a question, just a point of clarification. The Antrim County Clerk said that they pulled their numbers off the tapes. They didn't do an actual physical recount of the ballots.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that correction.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you very much, committee members. Appreciate it.
Okay. So now to those who have come here to testify, I have received your cards. If you are not familiar with the process and you want to testify, please find a